What did Jungkook finally say, and why did his words make ARMY around the world freeze in shock? Was the truth about his bond with Taehyung really hidden all this time, or is there something even deeper waiting to be understood? What if everything ARMY thought they understood was only the surface of a much deeper story? And what if the silence that lingered for years was never emptiness, but protection? What if the truth Jungkook finally allowed himself to speak was not explosive because of scandal, but because of honesty, vulnerability, and emotion that had been held back for far too long? In the last few hours, one name has echoed louder than any other across timelines, group chats, and sleepless nights: Jungkook. And with that name came a wave of shock, confusion, tears, and a single burning question that refuses to go away. What is the real truth about his relationship with Taehyung that has been hidden in plain sight all along? Before you continue, if you feel your heart beating a little faster and your mind already racing with theories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because what unfolds in this story is not just about idols on a stage, but about emotions, bonds, and truths that resonate deeply with anyone who has ever cared, waited, and wondered. For years, ARMY has lived between moments. A glance caught on camera that felt too heavy to be accidental. A silence during interviews that spoke louder than words. A distance that appeared suddenly, then softened just as quickly, leaving fans asking themselves whether they were imagining things or witnessing something real but unspoken. Jungkook and Taehyung have always shared a connection that feels different. Something that defies simple labels and refuses to be neatly explained. It is precisely this complexity that made Jungkook's recent words hit like an emotional wave crashing without warning. That he did not shout. He did not accuse. He did not reveal secrets in the way tabloids hunger for. Instead, what shocked ARMY was the calm, the weight, and the sincerity in his voice. Jungkook spoke as someone who had carried something quietly for a long time, not as someone seeking attention, but as someone finally choosing honesty over comfort. And in that honesty, he addressed the bond that has followed him and Taehyung like a shadow since their earliest days together. He spoke of growth, of misunderstanding, of how two people can care deeply for each other while still struggling under the weight of expectations placed upon them by the world. He spoke about how silence can sometimes be mistaken for distance, and how protecting something precious does not always look like holding it close in public view. As his words unfolded, ARMY began to realize that this was not a revelation designed to shock, but a truth meant to heal, even if it hurt first. The emotional reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Some fans cried, feeling validated after years of sensing something unspoken. Others felt confused, unsure how to process a truth that did not fit neatly into existing narratives. And then there were those who felt a quiet sadness, realizing how much pressure Jungkook and Taehyung have endured simply for being human in a world that often demands perfection and clarity where none exists. What makes this moment so powerful is not what was explicitly said, but what was finally acknowledged. Jungkook did not deny the depth of his bond with Taehyung. He did not reduce it to something trivial or dismissive. Instead, he described it as something real, evolving, and deeply affected by time, circumstances, and the relentless gaze of the public. That alone was enough to send shockwaves through ARMY, because it confirmed what many had long felt in their hearts but never heard aloud. The truth as Jungkook presented it is not a dramatic twist, but a quiet confession. Relationships, especially those formed under intense pressure and shared dreams, are not static. They change. They stretch. They sometimes hurt. And sometimes, the hardest part is not the change itself, but the inability to explain it without being misunderstood. Jungkook's words suggested that what was hidden was not a secret relationship, but the emotional reality of navigating closeness and distance while growing into oneself. Taehyung's name, when mentioned, carried no bitterness. Instead, it was wrapped in respect, gratitude, and a kind of affection that feels deeper because it is restrained. This, perhaps, is what unsettled ARMY the most. There was no denial of significance, no attempt to rewrite history, only an acceptance that what they shared mattered, and still does, even if it no longer looks the same to the outside world. As fans replay his words again and again, searching for clues, meanings, and hidden messages, one thing becomes clear. This was not about feeding rumors, but about reclaiming a narrative. Jungkook spoke as someone tired of watching others define his feelings for him. In doing so, he invited ARMY to listen not with expectation, but with empathy. The emotional weight of this moment also forces a larger reflection. Why did this truth feel so shocking? Perhaps because it reminds us that idols are not characters frozen in time, but people who grow, change, and sometimes struggle quietly. Perhaps because ARMY, in loving them, also projected hopes, fears, and stories onto their bond. Jungkook's words gently, but firmly, asked fans to let go of rigid interpretations and allow space for complexity. There is a kind of bravery in choosing vulnerability over silence, especially when silence is safer. Jungkook's revelation, if it can be called that, was not about exposing something hidden, but about illuminating the emotional reality behind years of speculation. It was a reminder that not all truths come in the form of shocking confessions. Some arrive as soft, steady honesty that takes time to fully understand. As the hours pass and reactions continue to pour in, ARMY finds itself at a crossroads. Will this moment deepen understanding? Or will it be twisted into yet another narrative that ignores the heart of what was said? Jungkook's words stand on their own, asking not for judgment, but for listening. They ask ARMY to trust that what has always been felt was not wrong, but incomplete without context. In the end, the real shock is not that Jungkook spoke about Taehyung, but that he did so with such emotional clarity. The truth he revealed is not something that can be summarized in a headline or reduced to a rumor. It is a truth about connection, pressure, growth, and the quiet strength it takes to be honest in a world that often prefers fantasy over reality. And as ARMY continues to process, one question lingers in the air, heavier than any rumor ever was. Now that Jungkook has finally spoken from the heart, are we ready to truly hear him? Not as an idol bound by expectations, but as a human being brave enough to share his truth? The moment Jungkook's words began to circulate, ARMY did what it has always done in moments like this. It listened closely, read between the lines, and tried to understand not just what was said, but why it was said now. The timing itself felt loaded with meaning. After years of carefully measured silence and carefully chosen smiles, why speak now? Why allow such a personal truth to surface when it would inevitably reopen questions that never fully disappeared? What followed was not chaos, but a slow emotional unraveling. Fans began revisiting old moments, not to prove theories, but to recontextualize memories. Interactions once dismissed as playful suddenly felt heavier. Periods of distance that sparked endless speculation now appeared under a different light, no longer mysterious gaps, but pauses shaped by growth, pressure, and the quiet need to breathe away from the spotlight. Jungkook's words did not give answers in the way gossip demands answers. Instead, they gave permission to see the past with more compassion. There was a striking maturity in the way he spoke about Taehyung, a maturity that suggested reflection rather than reaction. He did not frame their bond as something broken, nor did he romanticize it for the sake of pleasing fans. He acknowledged complexity, something rare in an industry that often simplifies relationships into neat categories. In doing so, he reminded everyone listening that some connections cannot be defined by labels without losing their truth. Emotionally, this was perhaps the most challenging part for ARMY to accept. Many fans realized that they had been holding on to an image frozen in time. An idea of Jungkook and Taehyung that existed in a specific era, under specific circumstances. Jungkook's honesty gently shattered that still image, replacing it with something more human and more real. Change, he implied, is not betrayal. Growth is not abandonment. Silence is not always distance. As discussions deepened, another layer of shock emerged. Jungkook's words subtly exposed the cost of being endlessly observed.